George Rodriguez. Thank you so much for being here at the San Juan Islands Museum of Art. It's a pleasure and honor to have you bring your work all the way. Let's see, you're in Philadelphia right now, is that correct?
Yep, currently living in Philadelphia, but I do have a studio in Seattle, so I do. And I've been in that studio 7-8 years maybe, and I've lived in Seattle for 12. So I feel like Seattle, Pacific Northwest is really my home.
Okay.
One of my many.
And you're doing a teaching back east, is that right?
I was doing a residency at Temple University at the Tyler School of Art, which just came to an end August of 22. So now I'm trying to decide alongside my partner what the next step for us on the East Coast is.
Yeah. Oh, and so do you think you'll stay on the East Coast?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. We like that. And she's from New York City originally in theater, so we like having, those options.
Yeah. I know that you have a gallery here in Seattle, Foster White, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. Foster White Gallery. I've been with them for 11, 12 years now.
Wow.
I know.
You're having a show soon, aren't you?
It opens up in April, April 6th.
Good, April. Soon.
Soon, very soon.
So, if you could, just speak a little bit about what we're looking at, and then I'll come in and ask you a few more questions.
Great.
How's that?
Okay. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
So the work behind me, El Zodíaco Familiar, is a series that I started in 2018, and it first started with a set of 12 animals that were my reinterpretation of the Chinese Zodiac. So instead of using the animals from the Chinese Zodiac, I reimagined them as animals that were found in and around Mexico. So, for instance, instead of the year of the tiger, it would be El Año del Jaguar, the year of the jaguar, because jaguars are more found in Mexico instead of tigers. So I did that, and I reinterpreted all 12 animals, made the first series, which was fully my interpretation of the animal with this like decorative pattern. And then the second version was an alebrijes, which are these small wooden, very colorful wooden figures from Mexico. So I reinterpreted the zodiac as an alebrije. The third version was in like a bronze glaze, because these are inspired also by Ai Weiwei's Circle of Animals, which I've been able to see in person, and they're like phenomenal sculptures. And then this fifth version is actually a collaboration with 13 other artists who identify as Mexican or Chicane, of Mexican descent. And each of these artists worked on the animal that correlates to their year of birth. So if I walk over to the deer here, this is Carolina Jimenez. Carolina lives in Brooklyn, New York, and she's a textile artist. She does a lot of weaving. So when we first thought about our collaboration, we talked about how we could incorporate fabric and textiles into the work. So I made the entire ceramic form with these small perforations where she could attach her weavings into it. And the ears, we wanted to resemble a loom, so we left it open so that the weaving could kind of play a little bit with that. And the antlers are made of only yarn, so it's just tight yarn. There's no inner structure in there. It's all fabric. And this is a conversation that I had with Carolina online, and I did that with all the other 13 artists in the grouping. I can go through as many artists as you'd like me to talk about.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the one that I guess would be the Chinese ox, but I'm not sure what it is.
It's a bull.
A bull.
Mm-hmm.
And I was noticing when I looked up close that it's photography, and it looked like the border wall.
Yeah. So this piece was made in collaboration with Marilyn Montufat. And Marilyn is a photographer by trade. She splits her time between Seattle, New York, and Los Angeles. So she's kind of all over the place in the best way possible. But when we talked about this sculpture, she has a history with El Paso, Texas, which is where I grew up. So she wanted to include the border wall because the border wall in El Paso is very prominent. It's very visible. You live with it, you live around it. So we put this division in the center of the bull to kind of mimic just like a barrier division between these two sides. And on one side is Ciudad Juarez, and the Mexican side of the border, and on the other side is El Paso, Texas, which is the American side, U.S. side of the border. There's images of flowers from these Aztec and Mayan codexes, little flowers that represent different symbolisms. And on the far end with the detail photography, there's an image of Marilyn's grandparents who had roots in El Paso, and an image of my mother who is currently still in El Paso. So we try and incorporate a little bit of that. And with the glass horns, just something about the fragility. You know, it's a very powerful animal, but having those horns be a little bit more tender and fragile, and still strong, but not have the same type of force.
Thank you.
Yeah, and very last thing, on the eyes, there's slightly different coloration, and that's a photograph of one of my eyes and one of Marilyn's eyes detailed onto the bull's eyes. So it's like a very personal interpretation of the story.
That's very great. That's so good to know.
So, if I could, Jordan, when I first saw your pieces, I immediately thought of Enrique. And because I have a collection at home, and I travel extensively to Mexico. And so, of course, Oaxaca was my destination of choice one year. We really immersed ourselves. So it's just to see these pieces, the animal heads and the way that they've been decorated, moved around and almost become something other than what we're seeing is really fantastical.
Yeah.
Which Alabrige is fantastical, in my opinion. So one of the questions I have for you is, so these collaborative events that you do, what moved you to that?
You know, with the collaboration specifically, I love learning, right? I love to learn and just like take in a lot of information that I'm not as familiar with. So most of the artists that I collaborated with are not clay artists. They work in other materials like photography, textiles, printmaking. So for me, I'm learning a new craft, a new technique. I also really love to build community and make connections. I think that's really what my art in general is about. So I wanted to get to know these artists. Some of them were friends, and I brought in my friends to collaborate with me, but some of them were complete strangers that I didn't know, that I found on Instagram, that I just messaged, and we started to build a relationship. And the tricky part was because I gave myself guidelines, like they had to be born the year of the rabbit, which is the Cacomixta, right? So I had to find somebody who fit within those years. And if they weren't in my initial friend group, then I would search out and get recommendations, or then I would go online and very vulnerably ask, do you want to collaborate? But you have to be born a certain year for us to do it.
Well, this is the year of the rabbit, so yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And so for me, the whole idea, I was very excited about this project because it was all about like getting to know people, telling their stories, telling my stories, and kind of like creating a bigger community.
Mm-hmm. I suppose you were doing your own work at the time, and some of this. So how did that manifest? I mean, how did that work for you?
It was like wonderful. I couldn't have, I give credit to the artists because they were very easy to work with. And it really did feel like a conversation that we were having. Every artist was very different. So some were more hands-off, and then we had an initial conversation, and then I gave them space. And then other artists really wanted to kind of talk through every step. And for me, being an organizer, like I love taking on that role. I want to move into, or I started moving into public sculpture, which I think also has that same type of organizational component to it. So I mean, I loved it. And I started this project during the height of lockdown in 2020. because I found that I just had more time outside of my normal practice, and I could plan and organize and make sure that I can facilitate a project like this. And a lot of these pieces were made in my studio. Either I would fly people in and we would bubble, or I would make the piece and then ship it to them, and they worked on it in the comfort of their own home, and then they shipped it back. So.
Wow, that's quite a bit of organization. And controlling them. So you just said that you're working towards more public pieces, or can you speak a little bit about that? Or
yeah, so I just had a sculpture that opened up, there was a big unveiling of a new terminal in Kansas City. So they are getting rid of their old airport terminal, and they just built a brand new one. And I received one of the percentage for the arts commissions, and I made a series of 9 large-scale jazz musicians that will be permanent in Kansas City, because Kansas City is a jazz town.
Perfect.
So for me, it was all about going into Kansas City, getting to know, the history, the culture, different institutions, and then incorporating all that imagery into the work. And it's, working with city, working with other artists, fabricators, and similar way of organizing.
Do you find you're working in clay for these pieces? And so do you find the size overwhelming sometimes? We were just speaking with Jeffrey, sometimes you just don't know what's going to come out of that kiln.
Sure.
So, does that have an impact on what you design?
Yeah, I think for me, the impact with scale specifically, these pieces are 8 feet tall, so they're taller than I am. And with scale, it's all about having the right equipment to work on these pieces, having a kiln big enough to fire. So they're in sections. The toll it takes on your body. They're heavy, they're fragile. I'm asking for help all the time, getting my friends involved in moving things. So. But I think that's the part I love, because I have to, again, involve other people in things that I'm making, even if I'm just making it on my own.
So, full circle here. Are you planning on more collaborative pieces? Taking this a next step, maybe?
Yeah, I would love more collaborative work. I don't have any ideas that are set. I've collaborated with friends when I've been invited to be a collaborator, and I haven't thought of the idea, and that's also a nice way to approach things. I like to be on both ends, but I would love to do more collaborations. I don't have anything in the works currently.
I see. So anything else that you can tell us? Final words?
Well, the main focus of this exhibition here is that Zodíaco Familiar, which are these 12 animal heads. And again, I love them because it reminds me of every single person that worked on the piece. So it's like every time I look at them, I see my friends. But then there's a couple other freestanding figures as well that I think of as like guardians for the space, or have some social commentary on myself and how kind of we move through the world. So, I hope you enjoy the show.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gabriela Ramirez Mitchell, and Gabriela is the only artist who lives and works in Mexico. So she lives in Jalisco. So when we have conversations, we talk about how I could prepare the sculpture for her, and then ship the sculpture. So she just had very simple asks. She wanted 2 holes in the ears for the earrings, and then a hole in the back for a small plaque that's placed back there. But what she did is she's working this tradition of Huichol. And Huichol people are indigenous people of the area in Mexico where she lives. And all of the imagery is placed on with colored string. So it's just colored string on a wax substrate. So she goes in and puts the wax, and then she'll, fill in with string. And there's images of peyote and corn and the blue deer, which are all these very powerful and almost mystic symbolism for the ritual people. Yeah, and the colors just like so vibrant and pop so much. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So the peyote is these pieces right here. Is that
Yeah, this is a peyote flower right here.
Yes.
This little symbol, that's part of it. But yeah.
part of it, yeah.
And it's a spirit. It's a spiritual. The people take peyote and go on spiritual walks. So they take small amounts and they go. They go and visit their ancestors and their future selves and all of that.
So how about the retail cat?
So the Capulice was made by Samira Stanmeyer, and Samira is in Tucson, as I mentioned, and this is the only piece where I didn't physically make any of this work. So she did all the modeling, she did all the glazing, and Samira is a potter by trade. I didn't mention, but Gabriela is a jeweler by trade. Samira is a potter, so she makes a really beautiful, like, functional ware. So she knows clay, and she mentioned to me that she hadn't built something this scale before. But Samira wanted to marble the clay, so she wanted to get these hues of brown and green in the surface. And the easiest way we thought of doing that, if she couldn't fly to my studio, is I made a mold of the head, and then I put together a PDF on how to use the mold and how to press it and so forth. And then I shipped her a mold so that she could create the piece herself. And I think this is the second, the first one that she worked on, the marbling wasn't quite right, so this is the second iteration that she made. And then there's pieces on these stones that have mixed in clay or mixed in dirt and soil from the Sonora Desert that she acquired, mixed into her clay, and then fired on. So the desert is in the piece itself, which is really great.
It's remarkable, really, touching base with people you don't even know, and this magic comes out of it. It's amazing, really amazing that the thought that goes into the work from these people. I just really.
And Samira's great because we never met in person prior to, deciding to collaborate with each other. And then for the whole time that she made the work, we never met in person. Like, we finally met this past March in Sacramento for the Ceramic conference, very briefly for a few minutes. And we were both a little awkward because we know each other so well, but also we hadn't met, so it's this weird, but she's amazing. She's wonderful.
Can I ask the piece on the end, which I'm not going to be able to say it correctly, what animal is that?
Yeah, so this is Quetzalcoatl, and a Quetzalcoatl is a feathered serpent. It's in place of the dragon. So there's no dragon in Mexican mythology, but there is a feathered serpent, which is pretty much a dragon, right? A flying feathered serpent.
Yeah.
And this piece was made by Josima Reyes, and Josima is a poet, so he does a lot of spoken word and also written poetry. Hence all the words on the Quetzalcoatl itself. Josima never touched this piece. I made the entire thing with his, with our conversation. And the words are taken from the poem that is being recited by the animal. So casita means home, país is country, regresé means I returned. And this poem is about his grandmother. So his grandmother, he's primary caretaker of his grandmother, and he had her recite this poem that then is coming through the Quetzalcoatl's mouth. And the title of the piece is Guerrero, and Guerrero means warrior. But Guerrero is also the city where his grandmother grew up in Mexico. And you know, she is a warrior. She's like brought the family into the States and has done a lot for them. So he wanted to incorporate and honor her by putting her voice directly into the piece. So you'll hear it throughout the exhibition, like you'll hear her voice speaking.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that going to go on continuously, or?
Yeah, it'll be on a loop.
Great. Will that be up and running soon, or?
Yeah, we just unplugged it for the video so that it wouldn't, so I wasn't speaking over it.
Sure.
But
Okay.
yeah, but it'll just continuously go.
Great,
Yeah.
great. That'll be good to have that going.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there might be, I can't remember if you scan the QR codes, which is really wonderful that there's QR codes everywhere for you to get more information. There might be a transcription of the poem that's being spoken as well.
Spoken in Mexican?
In Spanish.
Spanish.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the lime green?
The green one? That is an iguana. So this is Eric Garcia. And Eric is an illustrator, and he also makes political cartoons. So he has a series of illustrations titled El Machete Illustrated. Machete is the big knife. So it's very kind of like pointed and cutting commentary. But this piece is titled 1977, which is the year that Eric's born, and it's kind of a self-portrait. So this is Eric himself painted on the bottom of the iguana. And along, one of his requests was to have the U.S.-Mexico border carved into the dewlap of the iguana here, so you can kind of see that border line. You can see it more visibly from one end, right, and then the reverse from the other. And it's just imagery of, his whole idea is dealing with being colonized, but also a colonizer. So his his thoughts on living these like dualities that I think a lot of us end up living within. So, and I made the piece and shipped it to Eric with all the requests that he had, and then he did all his illustrations and then shipped it back.
So which zodiac animal is it standing in?
The snake.
The snake?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And Eric lives in Minneapolis. So all the
He
people.
was born in the year of the snake.
He was born year of the snake, 1977.
And what year were you born?
Year of the dog. Yeah.
Where's the dog?
Dog is the second one over. So that's a Chihuahua. So there's a couple animals that stayed the same. The monkey is el mono, which is still a monkey, spider monkey. And then the year of the dog is a Chihuahua, which is just a kind of dog. A very classic, yappy little dog. I love them.
And what is the pink one?
The pink one is chapulín, which is a grasshopper, and that's for the year of the rat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's rats are everywhere; they're global. But I wanted an animal that was still small. You could hear it before you could see it. They're abundant. They're very smart insects, the chapulines, and so are rats. So I wanted to, I was trying to pair these different characteristics for the animals that I chose. And that was made by Moises Salazar, who lives in Chicago, and Moises is a queer artist who talks a lot about identity, and he talks about masculinity and using, things that aren't typically seen as masculine, like glitter, paint, crocheting, and they wanted to incorporate that onto the piece. And the piece is called grillettes, which a grillo is a cricket. So he's playing with this idea of like grasshopper cricket, similar but not the same.
Well, rats have never looked so good.
Is this a good example of your pieces that you're doing for outdoor installations?
This is the Uncle Sam is at least height-wise is a good example.
Yeah.
The airport piece is inside, so it's very similar to this one. But as I'm thinking of translating the work for outdoor, it has to be prepared differently. I don't know if clay is going to be the medium. It might just be a clay sculpture that then gets translated into aluminum or bronze or fiberglass or something more durable outside.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Yes.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be such a blast.
I feel very strong in the clay part of it. So I know ceramics. I feel comfortable with the material, and I think of myself as an educator, so I like to teach. So the part of the collaborative process was also me teaching people about clay, and then teaching me about their practice, and even the clay artists like Samira, who's a potter, or Gustavo, who's a sculptor in clay. Like they sculpt they make in a very different way than I make, right? So like to bring in, I love texture, but I never use a texture like what he used on the goat piece. So yeah, it was fun. I loved it.
So what did you say about the donkey over there? That was a print maker?
Yeah, so that's Christy Tirado, and Christy lives in the Yakima Valley. And Christy is an amazing printmaker who does a lot of woodblock or linoleum cut prints. So it translates very well to how she did the sgraffito work on the bowl. And that piece is called Burro Mezcalero, and mezcal is the drink that you find in Mexico, but it's also a play on words. Mezcla without the mezcla, with the R, mezcla with the R is to mix. So she's talking about mixed cultures, but also referencing the drink. So.
The more you drink, the more friendly you become.
That's right. The more open, yeah.
So on and so forth, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's a donkey, right?
That's a donkey. Mm-hmm.
And what is it standing in for?
The horse.
The horse.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool. I really can I borrow that?
You have to borrow all of them.
Oh,
So.
Hey, you've got the wall space.
I know, I do. I got a perfect place for it. And it's just so welcoming and friendly. It's like it wants to start talking to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great piece.
I think I didn't realize this when I was quickly looking that the Hoicho piece was yarn. I have 2 yarn paintings at home, and it just passed me by. I was so thrilled to know about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really, because it's hard to tell from any distance, but as soon as you get close, you really can see it.
Well, I've never really accustomed to seeing yarn or sculptural pieces. I've seen beaded work on 3D, but I've not seen yarn. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. But when you look at it close, there's so much different color within that. I'm very impressed.
She did a remarkable job.
Yes.
Beautiful. How long did it take? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't ask. Yeah. She would just send me updates every now and then. We just had, everybody was working towards a deadline because we had the first show at the Waka Museum in Bellingham.
Oh yes.
This is where they were first shown, and it was great because that gave us a hard deadline to work towards. Everybody knew that the work had to be ready for install early June, so that gave us May to really get it finalized. And the people that finished early, like Gabriel with the dog, we used a lot of that imagery for publicity because he finished early. So that was a little incentive for people to get to work.